Welcome once again to Banter. I'm old.
And I'm bald.
Well, we took a little hiatus and we're back after a week off. We needed a little vacation, a little R&R before we get rolling into our spring season. It's spring now. Spring season.
Spring has sprung.
Ooh, that's a good one. We could use that for this episode. I'll look that up during the episode at some point. We'll get our producer on that. Hey, Bob. Bob's not here. There's no.
Yeah,
Bob.
I think he left the sound room. He left the sound room momentarily.
So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about idioms once again because we got our likes. We got people that were interested again, and that's I think that's our highest viewed episode was the first idioms, and we have some doozies for you this week too.
Like we struck while the iron was hot, for sure.
Another good one. God, you're just rolling.
Ah, dang it! Yeah, we keep doing this. This is the thing. Once you're paying attention for them, then you start noticing.
Just comes right off the tongue.
Gosh.
Off the tongue. Another one right there. See? Mind blown. Another one. See, they just hit. I can't even talk because I'm going to throw out another one and then I'm going to have to look some more things up.
This is unbelievable.
Unreal. So you've got the rant this week. When we start.
Oh, I sure do. I've got Kevin the rant this week.
Kevin the rant. Okay.
That's almost funny.
Go. You tried. You tried.
It's fine. Well,
stick that one in your back pocket. Save it for later.
I'm wearing shorts without a back pocket. But you know what? I digress. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Fire away.
Well, today I was thinking about what's really bugging me. And I thought to myself, maybe we should have Jack Talks Finances segment, which, look, if people love it, then it could become a recurring thing anyway. But I was like, all right, if I'm going to talk finances, what am I going to talk about? Because obviously you could go back and forth about, the banks are too big to fail, or you got to buy a wireless mouse with a keyboard. I don't need the keyboard. Right. Or the planned obsolescence of technology these days. Like, why am I paying for that? But instead, I'm going to go the route of why do we make it so like waiters and waitresses don't make minimum wage? Like they work for tips, right? I understand the concept, but why have we not streamlined this process? Like, wouldn't it be a much better, couldn't a restaurant start, right? And just be like, one of our draws is you'll never have to worry about a tip here. Okay. It's a sit down restaurant, but they're just like, hey, we pay our waiters and waitresses like $17.50 an hour. So don't worry about tipping them. I don't know. I feel like that would be worth it because as someone who works in food service and has worked in all kinds of service jobs, how much it sucks to be a waiter or waitress. So you're like, all right, I'm going to eat here and then I'm going to tip pretty well. All of a sudden, a $30 bill, it ends up, it could be closer to 40, and then it's like, why did I just spend $40 on this meal? I didn't want to do that. Why couldn't you just if that was worked in, I feel like a restaurant could save a lot of money or have their bill look a lot less to their customers. And then maybe they get more people back. At the same time, saves probably some time by the restaurant, because every restaurant I've ever heard of that does tips has some controversy about, the manager wants it put in a pot, or you got to file this specific way, or credit card tips take a month to get to you, or this or that. It is a nightmare. So where did this start and why are we still doing it? Because in other countries, I know that's not a thing. I know in Germany, they just round up to the next euro and they're just call it even. And the tips are cents, they're really small because service people get paid normal wages there. So I'm just if I heard the origin of this, I'm sure I would get it. But I don't get why it's still a thing now. Maybe because it's too like I can't imagine it's easier. I don't know. That's my rant. Like I feel like I could enjoy my restaurant experience more if I didn't get my bill and then go, oh God, all right, how much did I like that person? All right, let's think. Well, they definitely seem like they're trying to provide for their family, so then I got to tip more, and then it's just like I get lost in this guilt trip in my head, and it's just like this shouldn't fall upon me, the consumer, to have all this responsibility. And me, the typical American consumer, I'm not smart enough to make decisions for myself. I need corporate meeting rooms to make decisions for me. And that's where the rant ends.
Oh, yeah, that took a turn there. I would have to say that I agree with you in terms of the tipping aspect. I think about that a lot too, in terms of I've had some really, really good people and I've had some really, really bad people. And the really bad people, you almost kind of feel bad for yourself for not tipping them anyway. Like I've had moments where they've just been terrible, they've been rude, they slow, whatever. But then at the same time, I got to go, well, I've had bad days at work. I've had days where I just haven't felt as engaged or just kind of had a bad day, but I still get paid, right? And so I don't have to rely on the fact that if I have to feel great all the time and in a good mood all the time and be on the top of my game in order to get paid well. That's hard. That's hard to keep up with that momentum of like staying on point. Now, if you have a respectable wage, then you can kind of, as an employee, maybe do a better job because you don't have as much stress. So, and maybe you're going to have better outcomes in that regard, right? And then, like you said, with the customers, man, it is hard. You're like sitting there like, what's a 20% tip on $42.57? I don't know. I gotta like carry them to and like, I don't know. It's
Look, math is math. To me,
yeah.
the
I don't have to do
harder,
math.
like the math problem is one level of difficulty, but the step up of difficulty is like the
What's a
morality.
person's worth? What's a person worth?
Right. It's not my job to decide that.
No,
Who am I?
man. Yeah. And so I think if you pay them a decent wage and they say don't tip us, and then you tip them, that's different, right? But yeah. Okay. Moving on to idioms. This ought to be good. I'm really excited about today's topic. So I know you've got a nice list. I've got a nice list.
We reached out and the fans responded.
They did.
With the full force of 3 clicks. I'm not sure if it's more than that now, but the 3 likes that we asked for, they came fast.
And we will provide.
And for 100,000 likes, Old will shave his head.
I'll do it. 100,000 likes right now. I will say it on air. I will shave my head.
So Joey, start making new YouTube accounts because it's time to start liking.
We will do a live show, and I'll let whoever was the 1,000th person can come and shave my head. Let's do it.
Did you say 1,000th?
Oh, nope. 100,000. Yeah, that was close.
That's on video.
My head.
If we just edit that part out, it should sound
edit it out. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll get our sound or get our video editing guy on that. Sound guy can get rid of some of the
yeah, I think it's in here in the Adobe.
Yeah. Let me see. I can't find it. All right. So I've got one that I found interesting, and I actually said this one to my wife that how cruel this one was. Rule of thumb.
I have really short thumbs, by the way, for the fans.
You do have really short thumbs. I have not noticed that before. That's the first
fact.
How do you
like from the front? It looks normal. From the back, short thumb.
How do you grip those discs with that?
Well, your thumb is the least important. But look, I have this meaty part is really thick, though. I don't know what that. I don't know.
Zombies are getting a lot out of that one.
Sorry.
So, rule of thumb is it was an old English law that said that you could a husband could beat his wife with a stick that was no thicker than his thumb. So rule of thumb. That's a bit much, but was a thing. And
So like,
about
so
rule.
like it was legal up
Yeah, it
until
was
then?
legal to hit your wife with a stick that was no thicker than your thumb. It was legal at that time. If I remember right, it was that was like in the 1600s. I think 1680 was the furthest back reference that.
Yeah, that sounds like a year you would remember.
Yeah, I was about 7. You had a nice story behind rule of thumb. Didn't you say something about your dad?
I did. So I had heard rule of thumb in reference to mowing the lawn, that like you never want to run over a stick that's thicker than your thumb. Now, at the time that we learned the rule of thumb, we were like, 9 or 10, like learning how to mow the lawn. So like that's pretty thin stick, probably. I don't know. But I wonder if that applies to like adult males. But the other thing I thought of, like, you ever seen pictures of like Andre the Giant's hand?
Oh yeah, I watched a documentary on him, man. That dude, huge hands.
Yeah. So like that's like a bratwurst, is like his thumb. So like I don't know, maybe like that's not a great
That's
rule,
not a
or
great
like
rule at all.
or
No.
like maybe like back then, like when the rule applied in like the 1600s, like maybe like women's parent, like or it would have been the woman's father, I guess, was in charge of like arranging that thing. Probably. Look, we're not experts,
At anything.
so I'm just assuming this, but I'm just saying, like maybe the father of the bride takes that into account. Like, okay, Andre the Giant's thumb is massive. All right, so maybe this isn't the guy.
We're gonna keep searching for. We're gonna search for a short guy with small thumbs.
Or like he can be tall, but as long as his thumb is like sleek,
Really skinny. Yeah.
Yeah, like a skeleton kind of guy.
You got a short thumb, but is it
I feel like the width is typical.
average?
The
Average.
width is fairly typical, I imagine.
Pretty thick. Thick thumb. I don't know. That's a weird rule though, but I agree. Man, Andre the Giant's wife. Sorry.
If I were a father, which God forbid, first
Oh, please. Please. No.
if I were a father, I feel like I would take that into account. I would just be like, yeah. All right, let me see your hands, buddy.
That's the first thing you ask for. Let me see your see that thumb.
Listen here, sport.
What about the guy that doesn't have any thumbs? That's the best guy.
Do you just defer to the next thickest finger?
Wow, okay, we spent way too much time on this particular idiom. What do you got for me?
Wow. It's sad that because of that conversation, we might not get through them all.
We're already 20 minutes in. What do you got?
The term knucklehead.
Okay.
So I had thought of this when you referenced a phrase / word that you might get to later, but you had used the phrase basket case. And I was thinking of like names that you call someone. So the first one that popped into my head is knucklehead. So knucklehead comes from 1869 originally, and it's a part in a type of mechanical coupling device. So that is the name of the actual piece, called a knucklehead. Similar, I'm sure, in fashion to like a wing nut or something along those lines.
Sure.
Anyway, it was popularized as meaning a stupid person in World War II from a character that was used on like army propaganda things, and his name was RF Knucklehead. And he was the star of these propaganda posters, basically hung up around like Air Force training fields, telling you like, don't do this on the Air Force training field. And then it would be a picture of RF Knucklehead doing the dumb thing.
Huh.
So don't be a knucklehead is like, don't do stupid things like this guy on the army poster.
You know, a lot of these idioms come from it seems like they either come from like the 1600s or they come from World War II. That seems to be the case, right? Because we had that on the last one. There were a couple of different ones that you had made reference to that were from World War II, I think. And I think a lot of that just, this is totally anecdotal because I'm not an expert
At anything.
in anything. Uh, they were trying to do a lot of propaganda to get people to buy into the war or to, be supportive of the war. So they would create slogans and idioms and things to like get people to create certain feelings around the war, good or bad. So it seems like a lot of things came from that, right? And that's when like marketing seemed to pick up on. People were using like all kinds of different food products and other products to market the war too. And like this is helping out the troops and those kinds of things. And then it like exploded. But it seems like a lot of them. I have one up next that's shake a leg, right? So they say shake a leg. Um, shake a leg comes from World War II when they talked about when on the battlefield the bodies would pile up and they would literally walk around and shake limbs to make sure that the people were dead or not dead, if they were still alive. So they'd literally go around and shake their leg. But another World War II one.
So now that's like shake a leg, right? I don't say that a lot, but it's like look alive, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Look alive. Huh. It's interesting that those tie together.
I wonder if like look alive has its own origin because I'm thinking of like in what sense like would someone tell someone literally like, look alive, that's going to be important here.
Yeah. Well, so then that ties back to like playing possum, which is kind of the opposite of that, right? Of looking alive is looking dead, which is what you would think would happen in that type of situation. It'd be more like instead of looking alive, you want to play possum.
Right.
So interesting.
I don't know if this pops into your head during like a movie that you're watching, like a war film typically, but a lot of the times, um, I feel like if you just play dead in that war movie, you're good, like for the immediate conflict that's going on. And a lot of times, like I feel like if there's like, someone with a gun or something in a movie, like I feel like my first thing to do would just be like play dead. I feel like it'd work.
I'm sure it has in history. I'm sure there's lots of stories where people have done that to stay alive. So they did that in the movie Platoon, one of my favorite movies. They towards the end, a couple of guys do that. So a couple of other people had died around them, and they pulled the bodies on top of them and played dead until the battle was over, and then they came out alive. What was interesting is there was one scene where a guy did that. Everybody left, and then he looked around in the morning when the battle had been done, and he realized that if the commanding officer showed up and he was still alive, that he would have to continue to go on through the war. So he purposely injured himself by stabbing himself in the leg so that way he could leave the battle, like not have to continue on to the next battle. So it's interesting and I'm sure that has happened in many wars where people are trying to find ways to get out of continuing to fight, continuing to be a part of that, and potentially risking death. And so then they, I think there's far more that do the opposite and actually fight and engage in the battle and see their purpose in it and all that kind of stuff too. But I'm sure there's been lots of instances of that.
You really love Platoon.
I love that. It's a great movie. Good Oliver Stone flick, man.
How many times did you say you've seen Platoon?
Oh man, I watched it 2 weeks ago again. I don't know. It's probably been 30 or 40 times I've watched that movie. I love it. I love the soundtrack to it. The movie itself, just the cinematography behind it, and
I think they call it a score.
The score, yeah. Also a good album by the Fugees. But yeah, no, I really love it. It's just the whole message behind it, behind the war, behind the duality of man, and well, that's Full Metal Jacket, but it kind of comes into play in this movie.
Born to Kill.
Like it. Born to Kill.
So here's one that actually fits along with the battle motif that we're going with. I'm going to use motif. So the phrase to wear your heart on your sleeve.
Yeah, I've heard that one a lot.
Hmm. So this one comes from the Middle Ages, which we all know the years that was. And
Of course.
so we don't need to say it out loud here.
No.
So to wear your heart on your sleeve comes from knights who traditionally wore colors or some type of insignia on their arm to signify the ladies for whom they were participating in the jousting tournament for. So I don't know if it was like, like maybe was jousting ever like kind of like a duel, like Battle of Honor kind of thing, or was it just like, oh, I'm jousting and like I'm in a tournament, here's who I'm doing it for?
Yeah, what was that movie with Heath Ledger? What was it? What, they did that. That was the whole premise of that movie. Was that First Night or something like that? Or I don't remember the name of it, but
I don't really know a lot of Heath Ledger because I know like, The Dark Knight, obviously.
So he did a movie where it was like a parody of that whole concept, where he wasn't of royal blood or anything like that, and those are the only people that can be involved in the jousting battles. And so then he kind of foraged it and was able to get in there. But the whole point originally was to make money, and then it became to like show off to a pretty girl, right? So, anytime she saw his insignia, that she was like, "Oh, that's great. He's going to be here," and then he would show off and that kind of thing. And then he was fighting with another guy for her affection during part of the movie. But no, and there have been a lot of arguments in the past with people that's why all wars have begun, is fighting over a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more fighting over just things, right? Over that, but I think there's a lot of just old stories where they think that that's a piece of it.
Look, I mean, we all remember Helen of Troy.
Of course we do. I mean, that was in the Middle Ages, right?
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the Middle Ages, so I should know. Middle Ages. I don't. See, again, we're experts at exactly
nothing. So the point is, look, all right, quick question, sidebar.
Fire away.
So, Middle Ages versus Dark Ages. Is there a distinction here? Or is Dark Ages like when there was a plague? What?
I don't. The history files in my brain are not functioning right now because I'm just not in that mode. So just like give me a call tomorrow and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow because you know it. I know you know it.
It's in there. It's in there. It's just it can only work on like 3 or 4 different things at a time, and that's one of the things that's archived. So
that's fair. Long-term memory.
Got to go into the archives tomorrow. Okay.
So what do you got?
Under the Weather. That one I found really interesting. You've heard that one a bunch, right? Under the Weather. It's literally that. So people that were involved in like shipping and people at sea would oftentimes go to the lower deck of the ship because it didn't move quite as much if you're closer to the water or lower into the bottom bowels of the ship. You wouldn't see the horizon changing and it wouldn't make you quite as sick if you went to the bottom. So you would say if you were sick, you were under the weather. Literally, you would go under the boat. And so, yeah, I found that one really, really interesting that they would actually go down under the boat because you can see that being on it and the horizon changing, and that's where people tend to get sick. So yeah, under the weather or under the boat.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that one was good. And then I have a bunch of others. This one is good. So I have 2 that will relate specifically to us. I think you'll like.
Oh boy.
One is Jack of all trades.
And master of none.
So that one is from 1500s. I think it was like 1560 or something like that was one of the earliest versions of it. And there, I think that the one of the first references was there was this particular poet who was also, you know, good at a lot of other things, and his name happened to be John, and of course Jack ends up being, as you well know, a shortened version or a different version of John. Jack does. So the guy's name was John, and actually it's translated from something in Latin. Again, that's filed away in another archive, but John something or other in terms of Jack of all trades. So then, moving further down the line, it was referred to as, a lot of people would call William Shakespeare, Bill Shakespeare. They would call him a jack of all trades in a negative connotation. Some of the people that were doing plays against him would say that, oh, he wasn't focused enough on his playwright. He was doing all of these other things. He was a jack of all trades, so he wasn't going to put on a good show.
So more negative thing.
More negative. So actually, the whole concept was more negative than it was positive. It was supposed to be really on that person doesn't know what they're talking about because they're a jack of all trades. They aren't focused in on this area.
You know, and I think like it's a positive thing now, but that's interesting to think about. Like doing a million different things was bad. Like at that time, you pick your thing, you do your thing, you be good at it. You're a butcher, you're a baker, you're XYZ, right? But now it's like, if you can do 100 different things, like that is great. Like, or like the phrase Renaissance man, kind of similar meaning, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, no, I find that really interesting as well. Like that back then, that was a big, big negative. And it still does get a little bit of that negative attention. The wording and the phrasing has changed, right? We call those people multitaskers, right? And at first, multitaskers was a good thing. And then for a period of time, people would be like, well, there's no such thing as being a good multitasker. You can't be focused on 10 different things at one time. And then now it's reverted back a little bit to, you need to be a little bit of a multitasker. You got to be able to juggle a lot of different things, like a jack of all trades. It's interesting how things fold around over time.
And good to hear from another John who goes by Jack.
True.
Always good to hear.
So, in regards to folding in over time, the next one is in the nick of time. So that one's a lot simpler in terms of the concept, but they would say it was meant to be nick, meaning like right now. That's essentially and it's spelled the same way as my name, N-I-C-K. So in the nick of time, nick means right now. And so they would refer to that. They would actually just use the term nick to say right now, which I find.
Well, as in like, when do you want me to get that? When do you want me to get that rundown to you? And if you said Nick, it would mean right now.
Yeah, you got to give me that rundown.
Can I get a rundown by the end of the day?
Can you explain to me what a rundown is?
Someone asked you for a rundown.
Someone asked you for a rundown. Well, I got that rundown to you. What is this? I don't know what this is.
That's one we should start using, though.
What?
We should start using Nick.
No, don't. No. Oh, man.
Especially as coaches, like when you're like telling an athlete, like it's time to make the move, you know, time to go, time to make a move. It's like, let's go, Nick.
Yeah, sure.
That could work.
We'll let somebody else decide that one. We'll let you guys decide in the comments.
We'll workshop it.
Idea or not.
Look, it's got potential.
But yeah, potentially could not be used.
They're just gonna hate. I've got one, and I will wager that this is the oldest idiom that we have used so far.
Ooh, that's a tough wager. I'd like to hear it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. All right. In 168 BC, a Roman consul named, forgive me for not being able to pronounce this, but I'm going to read it, Gaius Popillus Linnaeus drew a circular line in the sand around King Antiochus IV of the Seleucid Empire. That's the one, 168 BC. We all remember.
Yeah, I know that one.
Then said, before you cross this circle, I want you to give me a reply for the Roman Senate, implying that Rome would declare war if the king stepped out of the circle without making a decision. So that's where the term line in the sand comes from. So
A line in the sand.
that is pretty incredible to me that there's one from 168 BC that is like been persevered through all this time, because that's one that's common still.
Oh, yeah, you hear that one quite a bit. I'm drawing a line in the sand here on that. That's pretty cool, and it's pretty amazing that, like you said, that stuff will carry over that long. And I would imagine that some of these that we have talked about are actually further back, but there isn't documentation of it. Like, it's hard to pinpoint how far back some of those went. So yeah, and I think that's what makes some of these kind of challenging too, is a lot of these are guesses on these idioms and where they originated from scholars. They try to pick the time frame that it may have come from based on the verbiage and the vocabulary that's being used, or translated from different languages to be able to make it fit and figure out where this is going to where it maybe came from, but it could have been way, way longer before and just not translated properly. That's what I find. So I have an example of that, like, let the chips fall where they may, right? We've heard that one. I always thought.
Shout out to Jeremy Craven on that phrase. He'll know.
I always thought that one came from poker, right? Chips. That was always my mindset on it. Come to find out that it's actually when people would saw or cut trees down and the wood chips would fall wherever they may, right? So let the chips fall where they may, because they were trying to contain them. And they said, well, let's let them fall where they may, right? Wherever.
No sense trying to control it.
No sense trying to control it, just let them go where they're going to go. So that one, it was hard to find a pinpointable timeline. And that could be as far back as people, when people cut a tree down, or whenever they decided that they were chips off of the wood, which chip off the old block. That's another good one.
We might have to do idioms part 3 someday.
There's so many of them. So many that we use and we don't even realize that they're idioms.
Exactly. So it's just interesting to me that, like, a phrase like that, like, one person at one point in history said these phrases, and then, like, can you imagine, like, let's say, a little fun thought experiment here. Let's say there's an afterlife. I don't presume to know what's actually going on up there or what any of our listeners think is going on up there. Let's say, hypothetically, there's an afterlife where we all get to hang out and with everyone else from history. A guy comes up to you and he's like, hey, I'm the guy who came up with line in the sand. You're like, whatever, dude. Like, no one believes you. And it's like, yeah, right, you came up with that one. And he's just not getting credit for his, like, it's like not getting credit for a joke.
He's still not getting credit for it.
And obviously, in this version of the afterlife, that's not heaven, because not getting credit for a joke or a clever line is just the worst. Maybe that's hell. Maybe that's what hell is like.
Hell is not getting credit for a joke.
Like, they just send, like, Da Vinci, like let's say Da Vinci goes to hell, right? And in his version of hell, he's just walking around like, hey, I painted all those great paintings and stuff. And they're like, yeah, right, that was you, And he's just like, it was. And he's just freaking out the whole time. And he's got to deal with that 24/7.
You can't take credit for things that you actually did.
Oh, God. Sounds comical. Really hope that's not what it's like. Far be it for me to make that assumption, though.
Wow. Yeah, no, I hope that's not the case, but it could be. Uh, I found a good one here. So you've heard the phrase over the hill, right? To refer to what are they usually? Was it over 40 is usually over the hill or over 40 or over 50? I can't remember. It's one of the two. I've heard it from multiple.
It's creeping down there these days.
Yeah. So that one it was kind of hard to find exactly where over the hill came from, but I did read a little article in regards to people actually believe that over the hill is the end of your cognitive climb. So the speed at which you can cognitively recall things supposedly stops at the age of 24. That's your peak.
Oh, geez.
And then you start to drift off in terms of your speed of being able to recall memories, recall things. Your cognitive thought processes essentially tap out. And so then you're over the hill. I don't know where the 40 and the 50 piece came into. That's probably has more to do with middle age type stuff. So at 40, you're kind of halfway through and it's time to start the downslope. But the one that I read was said 24 years old. So I found that interesting. How old are you again?
I'm in my peak. I'm literally at my peak.
Peaking.
Ask me anything, I will know the answer to it because I am at the intellectual peak of humanity, apparently.
Yeah, and I have lots of archives that I can't access all the time, so I'm definitely off the peak.
It could be
Is that
possible.
what they call that? If I'm not over the hill, I'm sloping down already. I'm already midway down the slope.
You're sledding. You're on a toboggan. You're
I'm
on a toboggan
sledding.
on an icy day.
Wow, that's kind of harsh.
Just
Icy day. Am I like Clark Griswold on the sled? Like he's waxed it and
look, I haven't seen that movie and I don't watch that movie every year like you.
I do. So that's probably the movie that I've seen more than Platoon. I've seen that one every single. That's a Christmas tradition. Here.
Oh my gosh. Okay, maybe. Quick side note: what is the movie that you think you've seen more than any other movie?
Ooh, Shawshank Redemption. That's probably the most.
That is quite a heavy movie to have watched more than any other movie.
Oh man, I've seen that one. I can't even count how many times I've seen them. I know every line part that's about to happen. That movie is probably one of the greatest movies of all time. Obviously, I believe that since I've watched it so many times.
Obviously,
I've also seen some very terrible movies many times, like terrible in terms of cinematic quality and stuff. Like Tommy Boy, I can rehearse that entire movie. I've seen that one like 25 times.
that one's got some cinematic quality to it.
It's funny. I've seen it a bunch of times. Yeah, I don't know. I have a bunch that I watched, but it's definitely Shawshank Redemption. That's got to be number one.
I think mine's probably Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith. Probably closely followed by like Nacho Libre.
Yeah, I enjoy that film. That's one of the few that I like from Jack Black. Like sometimes Jack Black can be way over the top, and he can be even in that movie. But I think it's a funny over the top because it's mellow and generally speaking. But yeah, no, I think it's a good.
It's good. It's a good pick.
Good quality cinema there.
It really is. Anyway, back to our very on-topic podcast. Now, I've got a couple. Wait a minute. Never mind. I've got one that's related to itself. The other one I decided not to use because it was too obvious.
It's related to itself.
I was going to have two that were related to each other.
So we're going south, huh?
Wow. Ugh. Sorry to our listeners in Alabama. If you have 6 toes and you're watching this podcast, sorry. Anyway, before this goes further down that rabbit hole, the term rat race, running the rat race, the daily grind, etc. So the phrase originates from the rat cages where rats are given a circular path to run on. Okay. It's a race which leads the rat nowhere but is full of struggles and exhaustion. So basically like one of those, or like a hamster wheel, basically.
Yeah.
So that being the phrase rat race comes from that in terms of like there's never an end and you're going to be exhausted no matter what you do.
You know what that makes me think of? Another movie, National Lampoon's European Vacation, where he's just driving around in the roundabout. I cannot get left.
Hey kids, Big Ben, the Parliament.
Oh man,
Wow, a lot of Chevy Chase going on right now.
I love Chevy Chase. Love some old Chevy Chase, man. You saw Fletch.
I did.
That is a good flick.
And I'm realizing, do I like it because of Chevy Chase? Maybe. Or do I like the 70s and 80s style of comic delivery where it's like joke and move on rather than the 2020s
Joke,
version
joke,
of comedy
joke.
where it's like, joke. Did you guys hear my joke? You did? Good. And then move on. Whereas like in the 80s, it was like, here's the joke. If you didn't get it, sucks. You know?
This is very true. That's the era that I grew up in. And also my comedy. I just kind of move on. I hit it, move on, see if you catch it. That's why we work well together on this show.
That's the best type of comedy.
Of course.
I've got another one.
Yeah.
And this one is super relevant to us on the track side of things. Do you know the origin of the term start from scratch?
You know, I did read about it, but I want you to tell me.
Ah, great. So the term start from scratch is an expression that originated from the field of sports in the 1700s when scratch was used in races to refer to the starting line. So you would literally scratch on the ground the starting line, like in the dirt, and participants with any form of handicap could do shorter distances, but still had to start from their own scratch. So no matter who you are, the beginning is the scratch in the dirt that you make.
I did read about that, and I didn't realize that's what it came from, because I think we also use the term scratch for like making things from scratch, like from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Realize that when you're making it from scratch or from the beginning, that's where it comes from, is more from the scratch line. But it's also interesting when you think about like what you had said before in terms of an idiom, which is draw a line in the sand, which is very, very similar to that.
It's
right?
about the same.
Very, very similar. And it's because you're saying that if you cross that line, this will begin, right? This will happen. This is the starting point of something. Or you have to do something before you can cross that line. So I bet you that idea translates from that far back.
And I find it bizarre to think that like it says 1700s, but I'm like, gosh, that feels like so much later than that could have been come up with. So I imagine that hundreds, if not thousands of years prior to that must have been used, because as long as sport existed, that must have existed.
Well, yeah, I mean, and as we know, the oldest known sports are the ones that we happen to be involved in on a daily basis. Track and field is the oldest organized sporting.
That and or wrestling.
Wrestling is the next one. Yep, wrestling is probably older. That's probably the oldest, if we're being fair. And then you go to, what is it? The shot put, the discus, javelin, the stadium race, which is basically the 100 meters or the 100 yards or whatever the length of that particular stadium was the first. Those were sort of the first, and boxing. So boxing and wrestling were pretty much in combo with each other. And back then, without going too far into it, they would do it to the death. So you either tapped out or you died. Like that was, and nobody batted an eye at it. Like you fought until death. And they train for this. So they train like gladiators specifically for those Olympic events. And they would, and it was a sense of pride or a sense of embarrassment if you lost.
So almost as if like surviving a loss would be just as bad as dying.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why I always have admired wrestlers to this day, is because that mentality is still ingrained in the culture of that sport. Is it's still there. It's not, obviously nobody's going to die and that kind of thing, but the mentality of fight to the end, do what you got to do, battle. I don't know if you saw recently, again, we're going to go on a little tangent here.
Weird. We never do that.
No. University of Iowa had a guy who won the national championships just recently on 2 torn ACLs. He had torn the second one. So he had both knees tore ACL. The second one he had torn 2 weeks before the national championships, and he won. And he didn't tell anybody that had happened. He wasn't trying to be like, I'm tough and brag about it beforehand. He waited until afterwards to say, hey, I tore my ACL 2 weeks ago. But that mentality is still there with that group of people.
I've never torn my ACL, but like, I don't, how
does he do that?
Are there positions where it doesn't hurt? Like, is a torn ACL one of those things like, it doesn't really hurt anymore? It's just like, I can't move in a certain way. I don't know.
But there's lots of stories like that in that sport too, where like Dan Gable, who was the world famous Olympic wrestler and coach at the University of Iowa for a long, long time, won multiple national titles in wrestling.
Is this just you plugging Iowa?
He broke his leg or broke his arm in the middle of a match and continued and won. But yeah, we got to go on my Iowa tangent once every few episodes. Of course. Come on, man.
We are lost in this cornfield right now.
It's a good one. Nice.
Mm.
Well, I have liked this. We have lots of idioms. We could do this. We could continue to move through this.
There's so many more, and we have found a resource that is basically a fountain of never-ending idioms, and it is supplied by the rest of the human race.
I'm going to share it. I'm going to pull it up on the screen. We need to show people this amazingness.
Oh, a screen share.
I'm going to do a screen share.
My goodness.
So
make sure everything's at least PG-13 on your screen, please.
Oh, I think it is. So,
wow. Look at that. We've never done this. Have we done this on an episode?
We have not. Not that I recall anyway.
Wait, we did in one episode that never aired.
Oh, that one's the special episode we're going to save for a later date.
In episode 0.5, we did.
So, idioms and phrases. What is this called? The Idioms Dictionary?
It's free dictionary, thefreedictionary.com, under the idioms tab.
So they have on the right-hand side, and Mr. Bald here introduced me to this, but if you look there are people all over the world live searching through lots of different idioms, and you can see it scrolling down there. This is a live search feed that shows you a lot of different things through here, and you can click on it, whatever you're seeing here, the great beyond. Let's click on that. And it'll talk about, that means the afterlife, and it'll go into euphemism of it, different ways it's used, keep scrolling down, references in classic literature, different idioms that start with it, end with the words that are within that. It's amazing. Lots of great stuff. I wish we had seen it well before this time, because there's some awesome, awesome things in this particular website, man. We're gonna have to do it. Maybe that'll be our next episode, is where we spend a little bit more time diving into this. I like it. Some good stuff in there. What should we search? Should we search for one before we finish up the episode? What do you think?
Gosh. We thought of a couple, didn't we? Didn't we just think of a couple?
Yeah, we had a few.
Let's see here.
Let's see what pops up. Let's see if one pops up that we really enjoy, that we'd like to roll with here.
This is live.
Tickle the ivories. I like that. I want to hear that one is Tickle the Ivories. You ever heard that one before? It's a video.
This is old. This feels old.
So to play the piano,
Oh,
allusion to its white keys, which were formerly made of ivory. I didn't know that they were made from ivory necessarily. See, because I'm an expert at exactly
nothing.
nothing.
This is really how we do it, people. This is real time how it happens.
This is how we conduct our lives right here. A wink of sleep. That one's pretty easy to figure out. I think a snowball effect.
Hmm.
Cut someone some slack. Might be a good one.
Gosh, I wish that there was some kind of unofficial sponsor that could like highlight things like this.
Who is our unofficial sponsor this week?
Gosh, it's hard to say. All right, bring me back to full screen for our unofficial sponsor.
I can do that. See, I got to figure out this whole camera thingy here, and how do I do that? Oh,
There we go. Let me just say that if this sponsor was official, I'm sure they would have paid for a full screen advertisement. Okay?
Okay.
The unofficial sponsor of this week is the state parks of the state of Ohio. Visit Ohio, people. Not known for their natural resources, maybe. Are they? I don't know. I'm not an expert. But basically, this is sponsored by the state parks of the state of Ohio. Go visit, hike a trail, get outside of Cleveland, get outside of Cincinnati, visit Ohio, pump some gas on the interstate, park your car, put on some sunscreen, and go for a walk in Ohio.
Unofficial sponsor. Very unofficial.
Very unofficial.
They may not know how unofficial they are.
They literally have no clue.
Great sponsor. I'll probably check out Ohio sometime in my life.
We are almost contractually obligated to maybe check it out.
Unofficially, uncontractually obligated to do something.
I have to agree.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. That was I feel like we had a great episode of Idioms. We'll probably have to do another one where we really dive even deeper into it. This has been our most watched in the past. We'll see if we get some more viewership again. Put comments what you thought of this episode. Talk to us about what you'd like to hear more of or less of. And we may or may not listen to you. You know, it's our show.
It's not like we know anything about any of that stuff anyway.
Yeah, we may say some things about some things and some other stuff.
Also comment for financial talk with Jack segment, because that's got potential in my mind.
You know, we got to get enough comments or enough likes to shave this head bald, and my wife would really appreciate that. So
enough clogging up the shower drain with your hair.
Okay, yeah. So thanks everybody, and we will see you next week. Again, this has been Banter. I'm old.
And I'm bald.
See you next week.